Here we go again. Yesterday was the Domination event in Harmelen in the Netherlands. It's close to Utrecht, which is a lovely city to visit if you've never been. And it was an event, it was quite a special event because with the four disciplines, with order and destruction and chaos and death, there were 10 players for each of these, and then we battled it out between the different factions to see which one was going to be the best one of the day. So I played in order. It was quite a difficult event to organize, I believe, with a lot of players dropping out and still only managing to hold this event if you have an even number of all the different alliances. So anyways, I am playing order and I have my Stormcast. So with order we decided that we would want to theme it a bit and everyone would bring Godrak, more or less. So more or less everyone adhered to this. And I with my Stormcast, I brought my Stormcast list with Godrak in it as well. So what do I have? I have a Celestin Prime who is just leading the army. Then I have in his regiment 2 units of Quest the Soulsworn. So it's just this random ragtag band of models and this unit of Praetors that I use as my second unit of Soulsworn. Then in the second regiment I have Mr. Lord Terminus with his Reclusions. Then in the third regiment I have a Knight Arcanum who is actually here hiding in the back. Not very visible in this picture, but with the manifestations of the Storm. And then I had some Gryph-hounds and the Stormstrike Paladors. Then I still have a Knight Relictor, or a Lord Relictor for some praying, and I have Godrak. So Godrak is quite interesting, this new edition, I would say. Mostly with the places of power allowing you to heal every turn, and also with the amount of obscuring that is on the tables nowadays. So he's quite difficult to target. And he can heal, so that is quite decent indeed. Now for my first matchup, these were just random matchups basically. My first matchup is the big, great, unclean one with his Taliban of Plague Bearers. So it's this army actually won Best Painted of the day, and it was an absolutely stunning army to play against. What does he have in his army? So he has the Great Unclean one. He has the Sloppity Bile Piper, I think it's called. Then he had a big unit of Plague Bearers, small unit of Plague Bearers, more Plague Bearers. I think this is not a big unit. Another small unit of Plague Bearers, so that means a total of 60 Plague Bearers, which is quite a lot. And then he had the Horticrux thingy dude on the snail. He had a Legends War Scroll, which was still allowed for the event because this was mostly intended as a fun event anyway. So they disease an objective and then people get mortal wounds on that objective for the rest of the game. And then he had a small unit of flies and he had one more hero somewhere, but that was mostly it. And then deployment wise it looked about this. So what are we playing? I would have to look back at what we were playing. I think it was called Bountiful Nexus, but just give me 1 second to look this up whilst I'm still chatting about the armies and stuff. So deployment wise, I am 5 drops, so my opponents will nearly always finish deployment before me. So that is, I mean, opponents always think it's an advantage, and then they give me the first turn, and that is actually what I kind of want in a lot of cases, anyways. Because with the Stormcast list I'm playing, I want to drop the Reclusions in somewhere. I want my opponent to charge in, and then go from there. That is the general flow of the game for me. We are indeed playing Bountiful Equinox, so if you know the objective game, then that is the easiest. Basically you have the pairs of objectives, so the top left, bottom right, and the bottom left, top right. If you control both, then you get some extra points. Because if you also control the middle, because you have to control one of each, I believe. Something like that. So yeah, my deployment, I generally deploy just half my stuff on the table because I'm Stormcast. So I have my Lord Relictor, I have my Stormstrike Paladors in a position able to just move up and attack the opponent to limit their mobility if they let me go first. Godreg in the middle, next to some obscuring, so you cannot be seen or targeted, and the Quest of Soul Sworn and the Knight Arcanum. So the Knight Arcanum is on the table, so you can already cast some manifestations in my first turn. The Light and Lord Relictor is there to get some points, and the rest is in the Deep Strike just to appear later. I do play the Gyronite Treasure thing, so I did give some counters to my opponent. So the big bands of Plague Bearers have treasure, and the Great Unclean One as well. So my opponent, he decided to go for first turn. I think it's so that he could curse his objective. Otherwise I would drop on this and then he would really be in the back. I think Nurgle does need some mobility, so in that consideration it is quite fair to take the first turn with Nurgle, I guess. But it opens you up for the double turn, obviously. Yeah, and my first turn, I think this was my first, yes. So my rule of thumb generally is that I want to put Reclusions down on the first turn in a spot where it's gonna be a nuisance for my opponent. I don't aim for my 9-inch charge when I drop them down, because my dice don't allow me to, and I don't think you should bank on a 9-inch charge from Deep Strike if you only have 2d6. So the Quest of Soul Sworn, they move up a bit, and this is after my opponent's turn again, actually. So the Stormstrike Paladors take a win. Gotrek in my opponent's turn, he redeployed, and then he moved up in my turn, and then he could charge. So he already went into the Legends War Scroll unit, and then he piled through to go into this one and to just whittle them down. This guy wants to strike, this guy wants to keep striking and just kill everything that he can. Another unit of Soulsworn dropped next to the faction terrain of my opponent. Faction terrain is a great way for Stormcast to just go further than they should be able to with the 9-inch charge, because you can just charge the terrain and pile in ways to get in positions where you normally couldn't. So I think just putting the trees down here, this first tree, I think it was a mistake of my opponent. He could have just put it in this, basically here more or less, where its units are going to be anyways. Then again, probably you just wanted to put the trees down somewhere. Prime also shows up already. This is a bit early, but then again, so the reason why I would keep Prime in the sky is if my opponent has mobile pieces that can tag Prime and harm him. As long as the opponent doesn't have high mobility or cannot get to Prime, basically, then the mobility of Prime himself is higher when you put him down on the table for the next turn. Because in this case he can move 12, have a shorter charge than an 8-inch charge that he would have in the second round. So yeah, how does this look for me? I think this looks quite alright. Backfield is kind of secured. I have some flies coming over the flanks, which are going to have to be dealt with at some point, but not right now. The only thing they can do is take my objective here. Still have my Reclusions right now there to zone it out, but I don't really want to go back with the Reclusions because I just want to deal with most of this stuff. And then otherwise, Gotrek is just being a beast, which is what he's supposed to do. So this is after my opponent's moves again. So I did score 10 points on my turn. He is going to take back the objective from me for his tactic and also for just objective control, scoring points. I'm quite happy with this board state, because my Soulsworn are going to grind it out with these Plague Bears that don't really do any damage to me. Stormstrike Paladors, they locked up this big unit, and Gotrek is having fun there. And this part of the field, yeah, sure, the Great Unclean One can still do some damage, but I will probably be able to survive that. Yeah, so I don't have anything in Deep Strike anymore except for some Gryph-hounds, but I think this looks quite decent. Then the next picture, we have a bit of a thematic shot of the Great and Clean One coming towards my my Soulsworn and Reclusions. So ideally, I would say from my opponent's point of view, he would not go into the Reclusions at this point. Also, next turn it's going to be... I mean, there's still the obscuring, so piling into this area I will get the -1 to hit, which I really love with Reclusions because then they're even more tanky. Next picture, I just have to see what is different here. This looks very similar. I think maybe this is before and after I moved the mage or something. Next picture. So what happened? I actually had an opportunity to take the double, and I thought, well, that's actually a good point to take the double, because this left flank has no counterplay. If I take the double, this just grinds down. So basically I lock the left side of the board for me, so I will be able to just reliably score. The right side is still to be a little bit disputed, but I can get in with the Reclusions and lock the Plague Bearers in place. I charged such that I kept the Great and Clean One out of combat. However, I would enable myself to pile in both with the Soulsworn and the Reclusions on the Great and Clean One in order to try and whittle them down if we were to countercharge. In addition, Gotrek can still move 3 inches here, then 3 inches here, to also help in trying to take down the Great and Clean One. So what happens then? He did countercharge. I get to activate something first. I activate first the terminals with the Quicksilver Draft, which means that there's no strike last from my opponent's side in this scenario. So I can first activate the Lord Terminals. He chain fights into the Reclusions. After that, we have had the first strike activation of the Terminals, so I can activate another unit. So Terminals fights against the Plague Bearers, doesn't really do that much damage. Then the Reclusions, they go full swing on the Great and Clean One, and they, with their 19 attacks, hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s, with a -1 to hit after. So hitting on 3s, wounding on 2s, I believe. They do in the end only 4 wounds, which is really meager, but I mean, it's okay. Then the Soulsworn, they do another, I think they did another 3 or 4 wounds or so. So that was also quite disappointing. I just put all the damage output of these units on this Great and Clean One. Great and Clean One strikes back and kills 4 Soulsworn, I think. He went for the Soulsworn because the Reclusions had the finest hour on them and they still have the ward save. I think he should have gone for the Reclusions instead though, because they still get the hit bonus from Terminals, they have the crit mortals, and yeah, you're gonna have to deal with them anyway at some point probably. But yeah, so this looks quite fine with just 2 Soulsworn left. Gotrek still piles in, and I do manage to kill, I believe, the Great and Clean One with Gotrek's extra 8 attacks. So Great and Clean One's gone. This flank is basically gone. The Plague Bearers are being whittled down by still the Prime and some Paladors. And then all that's left is basically the Flies and a big blob of Plague Bearers. So I don't score any of my tactics this turn because I took a double. But then we go to the opponent's turn, and oh, this is after this first round of I left him actually. So Gotrek didn't really finish him off. I left him at 3 hit points. Then again, I already gave a spoiler of what's gonna happen next. My opponent. Oh yeah, so this was actually my. I have to think about what was happening, why these flies weren't moving at that point. Because we had the first game move, we had the second turn. This is already the second turn. I don't know why the flies didn't move at this point, but so yeah, this is after the combat. The Paladors have died also in between. I'm a bit confused about my own game now. It had been a long day. But anyways, so the Great and Clean one's gonna die. Then we have this going on. So the flies, I don't know why they didn't move actually. Because this seems to be back at my turn. So after my opponent's turn. I put down the Griff Hounds because it's round 3 and otherwise I lose them. This is, I think, the most practical position to put them at because I don't need them as a screen and I don't need them anywhere else on the board. I could maybe have, I was trying to put them in the back to just threaten the heroes a bit, but there wasn't any space. I get a replacement unit of Stormstrike Paladors that now have a reroll for the charges and for strike first on the charge because the Stormstrike Palador unit got destroyed. This is my replacement unit for a CP. And then, yeah, we're just grinding out in the middle. I'm quite comfortable here. Godrak being on 4 wounds, the Prime being on 2 wounds, and this mess still just grinding it out. And then I think that is the final picture indeed. So yeah, I score 75 points in this game because I just kept the objectives the entire game. And I scored all my battle tactics except for the 3rd treasure because I took a double at some point and my opponent could remove one of the treasures. Yeah, so that was a good start of the tournament. My opponent scored, I think, 28 points or so. So it started with a 93-7 or something more like that. So that was a good start. Nurgle does feel like a good matchup for Stormcast, especially if they're really Plague Bearer focused and not Blight King focused. I wouldn't know how this matches up again into Blight Kings, but I would be quite curious how this matchup changes. Then the second game. This is basically a rematch against my opponent. It's against Bardwain. Bardwain is a lovely chap who brought Prince Vordrai on the big dragon with a lot of Blood Knights, and they've been painted to a very high standard as well, just like the previous army. I think in general the painting level was quite decent at this event. I also love, by the way, how my army blends in with the terrain on this board. How it really seems to fit together a bit. So, yeah. So this matchup, we have played this game basically before. I did not have Godrak, and I had some long strikes. I think I had long strikes previous time we played. His list is practically the same, I believe. He had some new manifestations, some new rules for some stuff, but we are playing cyclic shifts. So the underdog can turn off pairs of objectives. The pairs are the bottom left, top right, the 2 middle ones, or the top left, bottom right, and otherwise, yeah, we've been just alternating drops. Once again, I have 5 drops, and my first 2 drops are just single heroes, so I don't really give a lot of weight to my opponent whilst I'm dropping. And my opponent basically has to deploy the entire army before I have to make any choices, which is perfect. And then my opponent made me go first, which is the usual thing to do in Age of Sigmar, which is something that Stormcast with Reclusions absolutely love. So that's good. Also, just being able to just get the first move and having these battle plans with objectives out of your deployment zone. You could do a redeploy on a 5 or so to just get onto the objective and prevent your opponent from scoring the first turn. However, that's still quite risky, so I don't know if I would give first turn as much anymore in this version of AOS compared to the last year. Anyways, I start my deployment. I have my Quest Assault Sworn that we're ready to go onto the objective. I have my Knight Arcanum who can protect himself from deep strike by these guys. So he has a small unit of Fargeists to deep strike during the game. So I do cast my Celestian Vortex, which is represented by my birds. He gets on his days as well. And then we have the Lord Relictor in the woods. safe from all harm. I brought in the Gryph-hounds because I wanted to control these choke points basically. So this map, I have to talk about this map a little bit. So this map is a map with 2 places of power in the middle of the board that are quite big. And then these are also still places of power. So there's places of power everywhere. You can make them obscuring, which is generally not that impressive, except for the fact that you cannot be targeted by spells very easily anymore if you're in obscuring. So the reclusions themselves, they're not going to be fully obscured, probably, but they have their ruination roll. Lord Terminals can be obscured if he's close enough. And obviously Gotrek is going to be able to be obscured. And this is a magical combination, basically. So Gotrek can heal from the place of power, and he is obscured, so you can't really interact with him other than in combat, which is what he absolutely loves. Otherwise, my opponent is already facing issues with this guy, because he can land only in very specific spots. He can land here, sure. He can land here, yeah, but he cannot land in between these areas. And obviously here there's a big place for him to go, but he has to cross this stuff. Here, similar way, if he wants to cross, he has to go through this area. And in the middle, I can really effectively zone out his placements by just having some small things scattered around, really. So that's also why I put the Gryph-hounds here, so I can block either here or I can go here and be closer than 9 inches to my opponent. Because if Vordrai wants to come into me, he could go here, for example, and fish for a very long charge. I think it is actually quite a good play to send Vordrai over this side. I think he's been misplaced here because you can't cross this in one go, unless you want to run him and then go over. I think this would be the play to take in this case. Like the Reclusions, they're just a brick. So my thought was, okay, I'm gonna just go stand here in the middle, have support of Gotrek, who cannot really be targeted, have some healing from the places of power, and I will be amazing. Especially if my opponent wants to put Vordrai and the Knights in the same spot, because the base of Vordrai is too big for that to allow. So I would want to stay basically on this line, not go further. Because if I go further, I expose myself to too much footprint of my opponent, and then Reclusions are going to be in a bad spot, probably. Then again, if Reclusions go here and my opponent has to commit his entire army to deal with them, that's also a win, because this is like, I don't know, 1200 points, and this is 400 points, so that's a good deal. So, that is a bit of an intro to this game. Then we get started with the game. So I get first turn, I go on this objective, I do all this stuff that I indicated. I smack down a little house of my opponent, and I keep these guys here such that if the Black Knights come forward or the Blood Knights come forward, in my turn I will be able to move, attack something, and attack hopefully the Knights. Because they don't have retreat in charge, because this is not the army of Renown. So this went well, and I was contemplating still putting the Gryph-hounds in front. I didn't do it in the end because I was like, well, right now, basically only the Blood Knights can go in. Because Vordrai will have a 12-inch move till here, then he will have a very long charge. It was like an 11-inch charge. So my opponent will likely not bank on doing this. He will look for another solution, which is indeed the Direwolves. So yeah, we're in this situation. So I think for me this is a really good situation, because I do block the center lane of the board. Yeah, one fear is still that Vordrai comes over here and starts to just clean up my backfield. However, he's only one model. He can only do stuff in his own movement phase. So I do think I have the mobility to deal with that. Next picture we go to. So, in my turn, in my opponent's turn actually, he put up the Direwolves. In my opponent's turn, I countercharge with the reclusions, because I don't need terminals really to deal with all of his stuff. So the reclusions can mop up the direwolves. Is that true? It's not even true. I didn't even countercharge. I think it's just my next turn where I went in with the terminals and reclusions and Gotrek into the direwolves, and then I just cleaned them up. So there was a funny thing happening where I gave him an extra command point to activate twice. So he charged against the direwolf. He was within range. He was within 9 inches of Fordry, which is important, because as you're whittling down the direwolves, if my opponent had taken away this direwolf, which he was about to do at some point, I told him, please don't do this, because then Gotrek had not activated yet. So if you take him out of combat, he can pile in 3 inches, and then with his second activation, he can pile in and just start smacking this guy. So that would not have been pretty. So we end up with this situation. This is my turn 2. Yes, because this was my turn 1, indeed, turn 2. So indeed, the Stormstrike Paladors, they managed to go to the direwolves and clip into the Blood Knights. So this was my opponent's. It's not the end of the first turn, because these Blood Knights, they came forward more. I think this was during his movement phase. So he put these guys still here. They have to come up on the field, because otherwise they're going to be too far away from everything. These direwolves, I think they were a misplay here, because you don't need them, and they only give me a charge factor with the Stormstrike Paladors. So I do use this charge factor in the sense that I charged him to actually get into the Blood Knights rather than anything else. My opponent used a counter charge on the Blood Knights to make sure that I could not pile in and attack them, because I had the distance to do that. But now he at least has some kind of benefit to the Blood Knights. Otherwise, I have a unit of Soulsworn that I've just been running up. So they still have a teleport available for their favorite objective. I have another unit of Soulsworn that I use to just zone out the movement of my opponent's Fordry. Because if he wants to land here somewhere with a charge, trying to make it quite impossible with this unit of Soulsworn that can anyway still later teleport away, and it reinforces my my center of gravity here in the middle of the board. So yeah, I'm holding my objectives. I'm threatening my opponent's objectives by having the Soulsworn here and doing a skirmish between the Blood Knights where I attack them up with my cavalry that is not dying yet. The Gryph-hounds here are trying to zone out my opponent's teleport to score this objective over me. The only thing I didn't really do very well, I think, is protect my backfield from a teleport. And otherwise, yeah, I just tell my opponent, well, if you want, you can come. Sure, feel free. What I have is a terminals with a Quicksilver Draft. I still have 6 reclusions, so that's full. I have a full Gotrek. So if you want, you can come in and try to get me. Prince Fordry can get strike first. So this turn I could have tried to go in. He had strike first. I was banking on the fact that next turn he would not get strike first. Charging wise, I needed a reroll for this one to attack the Blood Knights. So I didn't have a reroll available anymore. These were 6s and 7s, but I want to make all charges in order to effectively deal with Fordry. And that's why I did not go into there. This is a really strong point of this block as well, that you don't have to go in if you don't want to. Bit of a thematic shot of our Fordry versus Terminals and Gotrek combination. And here we go, my opponent does go in with this lovely chap. So the lovely chap goes into the Terminals and Gotrek, and he also brings his retinue of Blood Knights. this is what that looks like. So we have one turn where we dish it out a bit, and then this is after my next turn again. So just some details. Here's a Vargeist that charges into the Gryph-hounds. We have the Blood Knights that mopped up the Paladors, and otherwise we have this situation. So this is basically my opponent's turn, and this is my turn after. So my opponent's turn, he charges in. My terminals, he doesn't get the strike first spell off, if I am correct. I have to think about it. He doesn't. No, he doesn't. He doesn't. So he doesn't get it off. This token is from my Paladors, I think. So the terminals activate and the reclusions activate. They all strike into the Blood Knights to reduce the damage output of them. And that works quite well, killing 5 of the Blood Knights. And then afterwards, Vordrai activates. He does 7 damage to Gotrek. Or I don't know if that's this turn or not. Otherwise, he did 4 damage, and we just had 4 damage. So he doesn't kill Gotrek, and Gotrek strikes back and does some damage to him. I think he's at like 9 damage. And the Blood Knights, they deal some damage to Reclusions. There's 3 Reclusions left at this point. So the Reclusions are taking quite a beating from the Blood Knights. However, if it had been double the amount of Blood Knights, this would have been a different story. But this is basically the bounce that's gonna happen here. So what's also funny is this activation order. So I strike first here. Then my opponent gets to strike with something. Then for me it didn't really matter anymore because these were not in combat yet. So I could actually strike with the Gryph-hounds on the Vargeist. And the Gryph-hounds have 4 attacks each still. So they actually killed 2 of the Vargeist before the Vargeist could strike. So that was not in accordance with my opponent's expectations. Then we go to my turn after. I do bring back some Paladors with a reroll on the charge and strike first now because, well, they died and they came back. And I have a Prime that can charge on a 7 now. So I just try to clean this up and then basically make it a good game. I'm still scoring my objectives. By this point I am eyeing on this one, but this one is turned off for this battle round together with this one by my opponent. So there's no priority getting there yet, so I can take a turn to clean up these dogs that have come back. So in combat activations, I first start with shooting with the Prime at this guy to put him on 10 wounds so that he's crippled. The Paladors try to finish him off. My opponent uses all out defense, so I don't. And then I strike first with, I think, with terminals. Because my thought was, with Gotrek. I just did Gotrek because otherwise he would be out of combat and then wouldn't be able to strike anymore. So then Gotrek finished off Prince Vordrai, and my opponent only had the Blood Knight left. This mess still cleans up the Blood Knights together with the Prime. This guy dies to the Soulsworn, and then my opponent starts his turn just with the Blood Knights over here. That are still, they're in a position where they could charge Prime and get towards this area, but they don't really want to. Because, I mean, mostly Gotrek. He's still, he just heals from the places of power all the time as well. These guys, off the charge, cannot kill Gotrek. So that is an issue. So my opponent can try to go for this objective that is not active right now, but will be active later again. But then again, I just have the board now. So I think there's a final pick. Yeah, this is after this combat. So there is some damage being done. But yeah, this is the last picture of the game. I'm taking all the objectives. Some wolves that are gonna die. And yeah, this is the end of the game basically. So this was an 89-11. I think I scored full points, so 80 points here. And my opponent then scored 33 or something. I don't know. So yeah, that was a good game. It was a good rematch of our previous game, and yeah, it was an enjoyable fight. And then the last game of the day, I played against Trogots. I have played against Trogots a lot of times now, because one of my friends plays Trogots, and this list had, this is quite a poor quality, but so this list has 2x6 Trogots, 2x10 Spider Riders, the Gobblepalooza, Trog, the Trog King, and then a massive spider. So we are playing on Noxious Nexus, so the one with the very small deployment zones, and then you have to branch out to the rest of the table, which is not an issue for Stormcast, to be honest. And yeah, my opponent dropped like this, more or less. Put the Loon Shrine down here, and this was a bit of a mistake, I think, because he deployed this, and then he put his troops a bit more on the inside. So I could deep strike, have a charge on a 6, and just try to tag him up. So I tried to tag him up with my Quest Assault Swarm on the big spider, and well, part of the plan was successful because I did get in. I didn't tag him up because I actually killed him, which is even better. So there's a little Quest Assault Swarm base there. I did the amount of wounds necessary to just lift the big spider from the table, so that was quite impressive. Once again, my opponent gave me first turn. Once again, I was quite happy to just plonk the Reclusions in the middle of the table. Afterwards, we realized that the objectives actually didn't score anything in the first battle round, so we just played like dumb people and just played it as if in the first round you get points for this, and we negated the 10 points at the end. But that would not have really changed the outcome of the game in any way. So, Trogots, my opponent in this case, I think he could put in the 2 units both on these guys, but then he has a unit of Quest Soulsworn hanging in the back, which is an issue. So the Soulsworn, they're doing a really great job here of, well, first of all, killing the Spire. Second of all, being a threat that my opponent cannot ignore. I think he could bring back Truck to deal with them, but it's all about estimating the power levels of your pieces, right? So I think this one would be a good one, and then the Trolls can both go forward, try to deal with the Reclusions and with maybe with Gotrek, but Gotrek is an issue next to a place of power. It's really an issue. So what does my opponent do? He is caged up a bit. I put these guys down here to make sure that my opponent with Truck could not really get very far up the field. I wanted to contain him within this little box here. So my opponent, this is the second picture. My opponent did move up Truck. I could redeploy to make sure that his charge was really limited in terms of where he could go. And my opponent had 1 unit of Trolls that went for the Soulsworn, and 1 unit of Trolls that went towards the Reclusions. So this is again my turn after, so I should always take more pictures, but that's such is life. So my Soulsworn, they managed to still kill the Shrine, which is also a big one, because that is effectively 6 Trolls, because no recursion means no Trolls are going to come back. Truck went into the Gryph-hounds and got charged by Gotrek and killed. And these guys, I think I don't know if they went into the Reclusions or not, because I did counterprey at some point. I think the first turn I didn't counterprey because my opponent's Trolls just went on the objective. Did I counterprey already? I think I actually did, maybe. So I was looking at this. That's the start of the turn. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I really have to. I don't think so, no. So my opponent, oh yeah, he sent in the spiders actually. So he put the spiders in front and he put the trolls behind just on the objective. Then he charged in with the spiders on the reclusions. One reclusion died because of crit mortals of the spiders, I believe. Then I felt like in my turn I had some different priorities. So there was truck here, which was a bit of a threat. Trolls were in the back, this unit of trolls was here, and there were still some spiders left. So I actually decided to just bring back the reclusions from this fight and try to deal with spiders with Terminals himself. And just sacrifice Terminals for the trolls. Just zone out a little bit. And so this is after my opponent's movement again, I believe. So just to give my opponent Terminals if he wanted to. And then do a counter punch on everything at the same time. Because I don't want to end up in a situation where I'm just fighting one-on-one with trolls, because then the dice dependent, they can still perform really well and just kill one unit after the other. So I would prefer to just make them come down a little and then deal with one unit at a time. And my opponent actually heavily obliged. So he sent in the trolls on both on the Terminals, because I still redeployed this guy away. So they both went on Terminals. Terminals then, is that true? I think these still went here, but Terminals only had to face one unit of trolls, yeah. So what happened is, yeah, so, well, this gives a lot of clarity. So the trolls, they went in, that was it. The trolls, they went in here, and then my opponent piled them in a little bit. Obviously I have 3 counter charges here available. I did counter charge with the prime, so I basically make my opponent choose between, do you want to try to kill the prime or do you want to try to kill Gotrek. Gotrek has a full health, so 8 wounds with a 3-up ward, so you have to do 24 wounds on average. 6 trolls, you have 12 attacks, which is going to be 6 hits, 5 wounds. 5 times 3 is 15 wounds, which should be about half of what you need to kill Gotrek, which is definitely not enough if you're next to a place of power and you can heal every turn. So I tried to just make sure that my opponent wouldn't want to go for that plan. So I tried to lure him into striking onto Prime, but he did strike on Gotrek and he did, I think, 3 wounds, and then indeed I healed off the place of power. On the other side you can see Terminals. Terminals is still alive, that's amazing. It's because of the trait of Legendary Tenacity. So my opponent threw everything into Terminals and I survived the shooting phase. And then afterwards, in combat, he completely annihilated Terminals. And then after his activation, I get to, on a 3-up, get back up and heal for D3. So I do make the 3-up, I heal for 2, and I still keep my Terminals with the Quicksilver Draft. So yeah, that's I think this is a good situation for me again. So Gotrek and the Prime, they removed 3 trolls. Terminals actually removed the troll, and then yeah, it's gonna be my turn after, so I can go in with everything. I was doubting whether to go in with the Soulsworn or not, because basically they die quite quickly to the trolls, and then there's other stuff. Does a bit less. So I did still go in because I wanted to tempt my opponent to strike at them so that I definitely don't lose these. Because there is a small chance that you still spike and you lose something. So I go in here, the cavalry moves forward to threaten this a bit more. And I think I have one more picture. Oh, this is a bit, no, I don't. So this was a bit of a thematic picture again. Basically, this gets cleaned up, and we just move over the field. And this turns out to be a 99-1. So that's a decent score. Overall, 3 wins in the tournament, and mostly also just very enjoyable people to play against, or play with. Out of the matches, I think the first match, my opponent just didn't reach the damage to be much of a threat, in a sense. So that could have been a bit of a different matchup. Second one was very interesting to see, I think, just to see how much also Gotrek boosts the damage output of this choke point. And this makes me wonder if you, on a close objective map, if you want to play Gotrek maybe in a competitive list compared to some other choices. And then the last game was, yeah, Trolls. Trolls have been quite a bit of a problem for me with Stormcast, but this works. This really works. The addition of Gotrek is just it's so much damage, so much damage. Yeah, so in the end I scored very well with being the best order player with my 285 points for the day, and also Team Order actually won the event. So between the different alliances, Order is the best. It has been decided, and if you have a different opinion, then well, that's too bad. Yeah, it was a lovely event with a lot of lovely people. A bit of a mix between more casual and more competitive minded players, but the intention was to bring a bit more toned down lists. I think I was partly successful in that because I still had quite a decent list. It's mostly the combination of the Reclusions and Gotrek, and people also just going into it. So once again, if you have this situation with this in the middle, this block can't really. I can tiptoe on this objective. I can go stand here, but I cannot go here out in the open and allow 20 Blood Knights to charge me, because then I'm definitely dead. So I drop down here. What would you do? Prince Vordrai goes over. These guys go over here. Just try to play around it, yeah. But then again, Gotrek is just a menace. Like, the thing is also that, like, Blood Knights have a footprint, right? They are on bases. So having a unit like that fight Gotrek is a challenge, because you can only get like 5 Blood Knights in at any given time. If they don't charge, then they're gonna do 3 wounds to Gotrek, and he heals for 2 next to the place of power. So that is not a winning strategy. So if my opponent had gone for this, what would my counterplay be? Reclusions would go to this top left kind of little spot. Vordrai would be a bit more away. I would use the Gryph-hounds to negate a landing spot for Vordrai, at least that turn. Gotrek would move to the right and just try to protect this area. And I would try to stay away from Vordrai, just teleport around with the Soulsworn to his backfield to score this objective, and just make it an objective game. It would really be a game of chess at that point, just trying to evade each other in the wrong matchups. Yeah, so well, thank you for watching. I hope it's been a good video for everyone, and I will see you the next time.